I'm excited because we are going to be kicking off a new 4-week series today, and it's a series called Love Your Neighbor. And I'm really excited about this idea in this series today as we kick off this series, because we're going to be asking some really important questions. Questions like, who is my neighbor, right? If I'm going to be talking about loving my neighbor, maybe I should figure out who is my neighbor. Questions like, what do good neighbors do, and why should I be a good neighbor? And then finally, we're going to cap it all off with this a thought of, what is the results of neighboring well? And I think this is an incredibly important topic as we head off into this season for a couple of reasons. Number one, because it just coincides with Valentine's Day, right? And Valentine's Day is all about relationships, and so I think it's cool that it's kicking off today on Valentine's Day in the season that we celebrate those special relationships in our lives. And for my friends celebrating the other holiday that not all of us are aware of, but I was aware for a long portion of my life, Single Awareness Day, which also happens to be today. This topic is a great important topic to discuss as well, because this topic is for my single friends as much as for my married friends. But then number two, and more importantly, is that this is a great series to be launching into because of how Jesus spoke about the importance of loving our neighbors. You see, in Matthew, in the book of Matthew, 4 different times, Jesus spoke to this issue of being a good neighbor. And he spoke to it, or about it, in the context of answering these different questions that were presented to him by individuals. One of those questions being, what is the most important law or life rule, Jesus? What's the most important rule that God has given us? And the second question being, what must I do to inherit eternal life? So it was essentially these people coming to him and saying, Jesus, if I want to be with you forever in your kingdom, in this place called heaven, and live forever with you, Jesus, what is it that I have to do? What is it that I need to do? What is the most important thing to remember? And I really feel like that should be a question that's on all of our minds. Right? Jesus, what is it important for me to be doing? Because eternity is like a big deal, right? Do you know how long eternity is? It's forever, right? So we ought to be at least concerned about our forever. And every time this question is posed, every time this question is asked of Jesus in the books of Matthew and Mark and Luke and John, Jesus answers the same way, right? He says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Love your neighbor. And I'm sure you have some interesting pictures or some unique pictures of what it looks like to love your neighbor. I had one years back when I was a college student. It was summer vacation, and I was living with my parents in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, spending summer with them, and late one evening, about 2 or 3 in the morning. How many guys like to stay up till like 2, 3 in the morning? Anybody, any late nighters? No? Okay. Well, I wasn't up. I was sound asleep. But at 2 or 3 in the morning, my dad busts into my room, and he's like, Tim, the neighbor's house is on fire. And it's not exactly my favorite words to be woken up to. I didn't enjoy this announcement. And our houses were that far apart. Okay, so that's the distance between our two houses. And he says, I need you to get up and get your shoes on and get out of here, because if the neighbor's house, all of a sudden takes off, that fire could jump the roof. I was like, well, okay, I'm a little bit concerned and kind of out of it still as I'm waking up, but I'm like, okay, fire bad, get out of the house. And so I start looking around, I'm like, okay, what are some things that I can grab immediately that, would probably be smart to grab? And so immediately I grabbed my laptop, because it's got all my college stuff on it. And I'm like, I kind of want to hang on to this, and it's right here present with me. And so I grab that, I throw my shoes on in the mudroom, and as I'm headed into the mudroom, Dad's going out of the mudroom, and I can see he's got his boots on. He's like, go out in the yard with your mother. I'm going over to the neighbor's house. And I look at my dad, and I know what's going on in his mind. And I said, Dad, don't be a hero. Mom and I still need you. Because if you know my dad, if he knows that there's somebody in this house and he thinks that there's any possible way, the house that's on fire, mind you, if he thinks there's any possible way there's somebody in there and he can get to him, he's going to do it. And he says, Tim, don't worry, I promise if it's bad, I won't go in there. And so out the door, he went. You know, I'm going out in the yard, and he's knocking on the door and banging on the windows and yelling. And thankfully, my neighbor wasn't in there. She'd already made her way out. She was outside. The fire department was called, and the damage wasn't too bad. But thankfully, it wasn't worse than that. But for some reason, this idea just stuck in my mind from that event, that neighbors ought to take care of each other. I mean, am I missing something here? Like, neighbors ought to take care of each other. And you would think that's something we should just know, right? You think it would be something that would just be familiar to us, like obvious, right? I should care and show concern for my neighbor. But in Luke chapter 10, verse 25, Jesus has to really spell it out for one of these guys who comes along asking the all-important question, Teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus responds by asking a simple question like he often does, what is written in the law? What does God's word say? And the teacher says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. See, he already knew the answer to the question that he was asking, and Jesus says, well done, good job. Hey, I don't know why you're talking to me about this stuff. You seem to already have it down. But wanting to clarify and wanting to test Jesus, he asked more. He said, who is my neighbor? Who is my neighbor? The very question we're asking ourselves today. Who is my neighbor? Who is our neighbor? And Jesus responds with this simple story. A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he fell into the hands of robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So too, a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, also passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came to where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine, and then he put the man on his own donkey, brought them to the innkeeper. Look after them, he said, and when I return, I will reimburse you for any expense that you may have. And Jesus said, which of these three do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell in the hands of robbers? And the expert in the law replied, the one who had mercy on him. Jesus is like, job. Now go and do likewise. Which means if we're paying attention, according to Jesus, our neighbor is defined as the person we come across who needs compassion, who needs to experience the love of Jesus. Our neighbors are the people in our lives who need compassion, which ultimately leads us to this question that if we are to love our neighbor, what does that love look like? What are the characteristics of the kind of love that Jesus is describing here that we ought to have toward our neighbors? And we discover the answers right here in this passage. Notice the three men who come across this Jew who've been left for dead. We have a priest, a Levite, and a Samaritan. Sounds like the beginning of a bad joke, right? And for those who may be unaware, the priest that passed by was not only a Jew like the man who had been beaten, but he was someone who knew the scriptures really well. He was a religious leader. He knew what the word of God said about doing righteousness and doing justice. He knew that, but for some reason, he didn't help. You know, maybe he was too busy. Maybe he had other important things on his mind. Maybe he's afraid that if he helped, he'd end up in the same place. So he just went on. And then we look at the Levite, still of the same people group. This was his brother, the same ethnic origin, but unlike the priest, he had more of a lay position of serving in the temple, but he probably still had the same ideas, the same teachings, the same understanding that, hey, I'm supposed to help people who are in need. He probably picked that up somewhere as he was serving in the temple. But he didn't help either. In fact, the only person who did help was this Samaritan, a person who was despised by the Jews and who was considered impure and treated poorly often by the Jews and couldn't even enter their temple, their place of worship. This person who by human standards had every right not to help this guy that was beaten up and laying on the side of the road, the person who by human standards had every right not to help, he's the only one who responds. He's the only one who has compassion. Compassion and love that were indiscriminate. You see, that's how Jesus calls us to love our neighbors. He calls us to love our neighbors with an indiscriminate love. Jesus calls us to love our neighbors with a love that is indiscriminate, a love that does not make distinction in favor of or against a person based on their group, based on their class or category to which they belong. Anybody here ever see Remember the Titans? You ever see that movie from back in 2001? Denzel Washington? Yeah. I love that movie, right? And one of my favorite parts is everybody's coming out stretching on the field as a team, and they've got their own way to come out and warm up, right? You remember it? They're all coming out, and they're together as a group, and they're kind of chanting. And you can help me out with it if you want. You can repeat, right? Everywhere we go, people want to know who we are, so we tell them, we are the Titans, the mighty, mighty Titans. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, I love that movie. And there is a scene in the movie where after winning a big game, Sunshine, the nickname of one of the players who had transferred from California, walks into a diner with Petey and some of the other guys. And as soon as they walk in, the owner of the restaurant tells Sunshine and Petey and his friends that they're welcome to pick up their food out back, but they can't eat in the diner with the rest of the customers. And this movie takes place in the 1970s during segregation. And the context of it is the reason they can't eat there is because they're black. See, the owner was being discriminate. He was refusing to serve certain people based on their skin color. And what Jesus is saying is that as people who are supposed to be loving God with everything that we have and loving our neighbor as ourselves, this is not an option. The compassion and love that Jesus calls us to show our neighbors is not a love that gets to pick and gets to choose who we serve based on categories like status, ethnicity, and social class. The eyewitness of Jesus by the name of Paul says in Galatians 6:10, therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all people. Right? It doesn't say let us do good to those who are like us. It doesn't say let us do good to those who we agree with. It doesn't say let us do good to those who aren't mean to us. It says let us do good to all people. Likewise, the eyewitness James says in 2:1, this brother of Jesus, my brothers and sisters, believers in our glorious Lord Jesus Christ, must not show favoritism. Wow. Let that sink in. Let that sink in. If we go back to our original question, who is my neighbor? In a very real sense, your neighbor could be the people in close proximity to your house. They're your neighbors, right? The people in close proximity to your house. They are certainly your neighbors, but your neighbor could also be the person who sits next to you in your 5th hour science class, struggling with self-esteem. Or the person who works in the cubicle next to yours that isn't treated the same as the rest of the workers. Or the guy or the girl on the street holding a sign that says homeless or need help. And while we may not be able to do everything or help with everything or help everyone in the moment, certainly we can do something. We can ask them their name. We can ask about their story. We can listen instead of just kind of pretending they're not there and walking away. We can pray for them. We can maybe offer a gesture of kindness of some sort. In fact, we've created some cards. Hopefully you've received one. If not, you can grab one on your way out that we're going to use over the next 4 weeks. And on the front of them, they have printed Love Your Neighbor Challenge. And then on the reverse side, they give 4 different challenges to help us each begin to love our neighbors well. And I'm telling you, these are really simple challenges, guys. They're not difficult. And what we're asking is that over the next 4 weeks, you try to accomplish one of these challenges each week. Maybe you can't do it once a week, but look for an opportunity to accomplish one of the challenges in an effort just to get to know your neighbors, just to notice your neighbor, just to start trying to figure out how to practically love people well. And then at the end of the challenge, what we want to do is gather up some of the stories and see maybe how God worked in your life and worked in the lives of those that you had compassion on. And I'm excited to see what happens on the other side of this. But as we continue on, we've got to understand that not only is this love or this compassion that Jesus is talking about, not only is it indiscriminate, but also we got to understand, and I feel like this sets the bar a little higher, is that Jesus calls us to love our neighbors with a sacrificial love. He says we're to love them with a sacrificial love. That's what we're getting the picture of here. I mean, notice how the Samaritan exercises compassion, right? First of all, he stops, right? He stops and he notices. I feel like there's a little bit of speculation going on here because this is not an actual historical event. It's just a story that Jesus told. But it's a very interesting story that he told. Notice how the Samaritan in the story exercises the compassion. He stops. We don't know what business he was on or why he was traveling. He may have had something important to do, just like the priest and just like the Levite, and yet he stops. He sacrifices his time. And then he bandages the man, and he puts oil and wine on his wounds. And I think to myself, where did the oil and the wine come from? Where did the bandages come from? Did people back then just like naturally travel with those things on hand? Just in case? Did he have a first century aid kit or something like that? A first century first aid kit? Is that what he had? Or perhaps he had to acquire them in some other way. We don't know. It's in the story. But what we do know is they just didn't appear out of thin air. He had to acquire them by some means. But then on top of that, he then loads him on his donkey and travels to a nearby inn and pays 2 days' wages for this total stranger. And the thing about it that's really interesting, that really gets me as I think about this, is most likely he didn't even like the total stranger. This isn't like having compassion on someone that you see that has a need and you don't know them and you don't know their background or you don't know their history or you don't know their story. No, he doesn't even like the guy. And yet he has compassion on him. And he takes him to this inn and he pays 2 days' wages for him to stay there. And then this is the kicker. He says, if it costs more when I come back on my way through, I'll take care of the rest. Are you kidding me? Are you following me as we look at this story? This is the kind of radical love. This is the kind of compassion that Jesus calls us toward our neighbors. It's a sacrificial love. And I don't know if you know what it's like to sacrifice or to give that kind of love. How many of you have been recipients of like a sacrificial love? Like somebody gave on your behalf. Somebody ministered to you and it cost them something. I've experienced sacrificial love. I've also experienced like not sacrificial love. The opposite of it. I remember one time in particular when I was 15 years old. I'll never forget that cold, brisk evening walk through the river bottom out to our double tree stand. The water was about shin high on our knee boots. And Dad was in the lead, walking out in this water as we were headed to our stands. And we come to this log that's kind of under the water. It looks a little bit green. And Dad turns around and he says to me, Tim, I know this log looks slippery and wet, but it's not. Just step on it and continue on your way. And so I watch him step up on the log and then continue on his way through the water. And me, I look at the log and there's this fear that grips my heart. And I'm like, I ain't stepping on that thing. So I step over into the hole on the other side and poof, waist deep in icy cold water. My boots are filled, my clothes are soaked, and I'm freezing cold. And my dad looks at me and he goes, why didn't you do what I told you to do? He wasn't very compassionate. I can't believe you did that. We are hours away from home. And now we're going to sit here for a 3-hour hunt and you're going to be miserable. You're going to be incredibly cold. Why didn't you listen to me? I've been stepping on that log since before you were born, And he was just chastising me. No mercy, no grace, no compassion. And then he looks at me and he says, do you think you can sit? And I'm like, well, yeah, I want to go hunting. And so I climb up in this tree stand and I sit there for the next 3 hours. Lack of compassion. Not one of his brighter moments. He's a good dad, I promise you. Not one of his brighter moments. But fast forward a couple weeks, the river, it's a little bit deeper. Probably still around the 35-degree mark outside. And this time, Dad has to carry me across the river because my knee boots are, below the water level. And so he's got these hip waders on. And picture this, I'm decked out in my full camo with my backpack, hanging onto a bow, and I jump onto his back. And he piggybacks me across the creek. He's got these waist high or thigh high, hip waders on. Hip high, that's probably why they're called hip waders. And he's going across, and I'm on his back, and all of a sudden I hear, whoa, 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 and he's running. And finally he gets to the other side. And he says, I grabbed the wrong hip waders. These ones leak. And from his thigh down, he's soaked with water. Shoes on the other foot now. And you know what I didn't say? I didn't say, come on, man. How smart do you got to be to grab the right pair of hip waders? I didn't say that. I didn't say, hey, man, that's not real intelligent. How could you be so stupid? Not that I would say that to my father anyway. I'd probably pick myself off the ground. But, I didn't say those kind of things. Immediately in my head, I thought, I know what it's like to sit for 3 hours in cold, wet clothes. And so I said, hey, Dad, I got 2 pairs of socks on. How about I take off a pair of my socks and give them to you, and then we can both sit up in the tree stand with warm feet. As a sacrificial love, as a compassionate love. And little did I know, but that act of compassion, that sacrifice of giving what I had to keep myself warm to him, it moved him. And it changed something in his heart. And I kind of think to myself, how often do we see people with a need? Right? How do we often see people around us with metaphorical wet socks of some sort? And then we're quick to say, well, it's their own fault. Right? They should have paid more careful attention. They should have been a little bit more intentional. They should have listened or grabbed the right pair of waders. If they would have made better choices in their life, they wouldn't be where they are. If they wouldn't be in this position if they were a little bit more responsible. If maybe the Jewish man in our story had traveled with some companions or traveled during better hours or avoided the spot entirely or had a dog or a staff or a sling or something with him, then maybe he wouldn't have been robbed and left for dead. It's his choices that led him to this scenario. It's his own fault. He must have earned it somehow. And yet, what does the Samaritan do? What does the Samaritan do? He doesn't question or judge how this man got there. No, he just stops and he sees a need, the need of his neighbor, and he meets it. He meets the need using his own time and resources to make sure the man is taken care of. He loves his neighbor sacrificially. And I wonder, Do we love our neighbors the same way? Do we love our neighbors with sacrificial love? Or do we look at sacrificial love as difficult, as inconvenient because we're afraid of losing what we have, afraid of being taken advantage of, afraid of what other people will think, afraid that we're going to enable somebody, because that could certainly be the case. It could. I mean, it's true that when we're meeting people's needs, meeting our neighbors' needs, it's much easier when it doesn't cost us very much. It's much easier when we know the circumstances surrounding the case, when there's not much at stake. But listen to what Jesus says in Matthew chapter 25, verse 40, and we'll come back to it a little later on in the series. Listen to what he says. Truly, I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. So here's my thought. Instead of looking at sacrificial love as something that costs us, what if we began to reframe it and look at sacrificial love as a way to express love for God? Look at sacrificial love for our neighbor as a way to say, Jesus, I love you. I may not even like the person I'm serving right now, but you know what? I love you so much, I don't care. I'm going to serve him anyway. Because when we do that, God gets glory. What if instead of looking at what we lose, we started to look at what we gain? An opportunity to give God glory. Do you think that might change our perspective? Might change our attitude? Might change our willingness and motivation? Because, you know, I'd really like to find out. I think it's worth it. Let's give it a shot. Let's learn to love our neighbors indiscriminately. Let's learn to love our neighbors sacrificially. Let's learn to have compassion on them. And I got to get one more in here before we finish up. I got to get one more characteristic that Jesus describes about this kind of compassion we should have towards our neighbors, and it's super important. We find it in Matthew's account, chapter 19, verse 26, where again Jesus comes across another man who's asking the question, what good thing must I do to inherit eternal life? Different man, same kind of situation, and Jesus says, keep the commandments, right? Don't murder, don't commit adultery, don't steal, don't lie, honor mom and dad, all the churchy stuff. Right? I'm not a bad person because I keep all the rules. And then he finishes up with, and then love your neighbor as yourself. And the young man says, hey, Jesus, all these I've kept since I was young. Since I was a boy, what do I still lack? And Jesus says, if you want to be perfect, go sell your possessions and give to the poor, and then you will have treasure in heaven. Come follow me. And when the young man heard this, he went away sad because he had great wealth. And at this, the disciples were beside themselves. Thomas, did you hear what Jesus just said? Did you hear it? Did you hear what's going on with a requirement so high that it costs us everything? Who can be saved? Who can hope to be rescued from sin and death if it's going to cost us so much? And catch what Jesus says here, because this is really important, friends. He says, with human beings, this is impossible. But with God, all things are possible. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me that Jesus is saying, you and I, we can't do this on our own. No, we need him. We cannot show indiscriminate, sacrificial, compassionate love on our own. We need him. We need him living in us, helping us to understand that the kind of love Jesus calls us to is supernatural. Is a supernatural kind of love. Jesus calls us to love our neighbors supernaturally. To love and show compassion that is beyond ourselves, outside of our capacity. And that requires that he be involved. I remember late one evening in a Michigan February winter about 2 years ago. It was cold outside. There was snow, and I went to crank my truck. I went to turn it over, and I got inside, and I twisted that key, and like it went click. And I was like, oh, that's not good. And the lights just kind of began to get dimmer and dimmer and dimmer, and I was like, well, I know what that means. And so I went and got my socket set, and I popped the hood, and I was like, all right, I need to take this bolt or this nut off so I can loosen my battery and take it out and bring it over to the store and get a new one. And I get down in there, and do you know where they put that? It's like, it's not up top where it's easy to get to. It's like, it's way down inside at the base of the battery between it and like the fuse box, and I can't even get my hand in there. Like my socket set, the attachment that goes on it, it's only like this long. I can't even get down inside it. And so I was kind of like helpless to fix anything. I was like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? So I pick up the phone and I call my buddy Matt. You got to know Matt. Matt's like you, Chuck. He's a big, tall guy, big old hands, right? And he has every tool under the sun in his shop. And I said, hey, Matt, I need some help getting my battery out of my vehicle. Can you give me a hand? And Matt loves to help people, so he comes right over, and he's got this attachment. He's got this piece that fits on the socket, and we just shove it down in there, turn that baby loose, take the old battery out, go get a new one, put the new battery in, and that baby then cranks right over like it's brand new. It's amazing. But by myself, I didn't have the capacity to fix my truck. The point being that, guys, sometimes there are things in our lives that we just can't do on our own. We can't do them on our own, and they require us to seek help outside of ourselves. One of those things being the ability to love our neighbors well. That's outside our capacity. I'm not sure if we're aware of that. I mean, sure, you can do good things for your neighbors. You can be nice to them, and you can serve them in different ways, but you and I cannot love them the way that Jesus does. That is outside our capacity to do. We can't love them indiscriminately and sacrificially the way Jesus does. Only He can do that. Which means to love our neighbors well, friends, we need Jesus. We need Jesus in our lives. And if you have Jesus in your life and you're still having trouble loving your neighbors, having compassion and meeting the needs of those you come across that are around you, then I would suggest the answer is you need more Jesus. You need more Jesus in your life. And I'll be the first one to step forward this morning and say, you know what? I need more Jesus in my life. Sometimes I show favoritism. Sometimes I don't love indiscriminately. Sometimes I don't love people the way that He loved people. Sometimes I don't have compassion the way that He had compassion. And I want it. I want to love people the way that Jesus loved people. I want to be able to show compassion to people the way that Jesus showed compassion. Because when we do that, Jesus says that's when we really begin to experience what it's like to be in His kingdom. That's what it's really like to experience life with Him. That's when eternal life starts. I want more Jesus.